Writing the script for this video, I'm getting paranoid about how to say this game's title correctly. From what I've seen online, it's HROT. I hope I'm saying it right. HROT is one of those titles that just never grabbed my attention while in early access. I saw Civi's video on it a couple years ago and it was entertaining, but not every retro shooter showcase I see gets me to actually play the game itself. I thought, okay, that looks like it could be fun, but I don't know about the depressing brown color palette. You'll say, yeah, but it's inspired by Quake, and Quake is kinda like that. Well, if I'm being honest, I'm not that into Quake's look either. I like Quake, I played the hell out of Quake 2, campaign and multiplayer. Great games, but they're just not my favorites. Part of that is the aesthetic. Now that HROT is officially out of early access, I picked it up and I gotta say I'm glad I waited. Playing all the way through start to finish was a very fun experience, and the atmosphere ended up working for me after all. There's an eeriness to the world of HROT that at times reminds me of Cry of Fear, one of my favorite survival horror games. Something about the look and feel of these places takes me back there. The ghost town-like cities and the subway feels so familiar to me. I have been dying for another experience like Cry of Fear. The whole game gives you this sick, uneasy feeling, combined with effective, minimal sound design. Somehow, 24 levels of brown, yellow, and gray didn't end up boring me, and a big part of that is the level design. HROT has very good level design, much more so than some of the 90s games that inspire it. All you're doing is hunting for keys and hitting switches, but all the maps are so well put together and intuitive that I rarely felt lost, without some sense of what I was looking for. There is a map, but I never needed it. The maps generally wind you around to naturally return to early locked off areas once you find the key or the switch needed. Tons of secret areas that give ammo, armor, and weapons, and as I frequently mention when talking about early access games, episodes 2 and 3 are definitely a step up over the first in terms of creativity. Maps never go on to be overly large, they don't drag on, so it's really easy to just continue to the next and fly through the game. It's got great pacing. To balance out the dark, serious, depressing tone, there's a decent amount of humor. Every episode ends with a recipe for some reason, and I love to cook, so I'm gonna have to try them out. There's a little dog that follows you at times and helps you kill annoying rats. He's really cute. And this part here, where I found enemies around a fire, dancing to music, I suddenly flashed back to that amazing scene in Freddy vs. Jason, where Jason walks into the party and just starts slashing away at everyone having a good time. So I did that myself. Now that I'm Jason, can I kick the boombox like you did in Jason Takes Manhattan? Come on, yeah, brick, awesome! You know, now that I rewatched that scene from Freddy vs. Jason, it really isn't as cool as I remember. It's pretty lame. It's like when I remembered that part from Child's Play 3 where Chucky replaces the paintballs with live ammunition at the military kids' school. I told all my friends we had to watch that scene because I remembered it being so brutal. And then we did, and it was just one kid that got shot. My memory continues to deceive me. There's a good amount of cute interactivity throughout the game, like turning on showers or flushing toilets. You can play with a train set, and what do you know, stuff actually breaks instead of just playing a sound effect. You'll stumble across joke moments, you'll unlock funny achievements for doing things like setting a bear on fire, and the boss fights are typically so pathetic they're hilarious. If you look at Quake 1, while it is a revolutionary and important shooter, the boss fights were terrible. They're just there because they have to be there to end the chapter. So when you're making a boomer shooter like this, typically made by one guy or a very small team, you have to make a decision about how to approach boss fights. You either have to focus a lot of time and resources on making a couple decent boss fights, a difficult task because a boss fight needs some solid AI behaviors and interesting gimmicks, or you embrace the history of bad retro shooter boss fights and just meme it up. Dusk did this perfectly. It had excellent, at times shockingly well-made maps with solid combat encounters, topped off with big, stupid boss fights against giant idiots. Yes, there are some actual good boss fights in Dusk, but the best moments are when you fight Big John, who just constantly yells at you in an Arnold Schwarzenegger voice, or the killer crocodile that you can just run past by waiting for the door to open, and the episode 1 final boss that has you fighting a giant projectile shooting horse, only to surprise you with a secret boss encounter against a tiny little horse that ends up exploding into giant chunks. HROT continues this tradition of absurdly dumb boss fights, like dudes sitting in wagons, Czechoslovakian president on spider legs in the dark, living gorilla statue with rocket launchers, the bottom half of a wooden horse chasing you around a basketball court, and 3 dudes riding bumper cars shooting at you on a dance floor. The fight at the end of episode 3 had me grinning ear to ear. I won't show it here, but if you're a fan of classic 80s sci-fi action movies, you're gonna love it. HROT's moment-to-moment combat will be very familiar to anyone who's played Dusk. It has that same feel to the super shotgun, it has a crossbow and a rocket launcher, they share the same melee sickles, and the AI acts the same too. The way the shotgunners move and telegraph their attack really reminds me of the scarecrows in Dusk. On an appropriate difficulty, the simplistic AI proves to be quite deadly and demands your respect, pushing you into long-range options when possible to eliminate big threats, and maneuvering around gunfire and explosives to get in for a close-range shotgun blast. Much like Quake, this game has an emphasis on explosives. They're fairly generous with grenades, which double as rocket ammo, you'll find landmines to set traps, you'll shoot explosive barrels and use the exploding guys to your advantage, and most importantly, when you realize you can kick enemy grenades back at them, the game's combat just opens up into some really cool combo opportunities. It's so satisfying to kick the fat guy's grenade into him and then blast him right after, or use their grenades to do splash damage to a group. It's surprising to me that they don't use larger groups more often. Near the end of the game, they finally start delivering some closed off and forced combat encounters. I know this isn't an arena shooter and I'm not asking it to be, but these last fights against swarms of spawning enemies were really fun, especially the one with the active train tracks, giving you a hazard to avoid and use to your advantage. You really get to use the power of splash damage, and grenade kicking gets to shine. But at this point, you're at the end of the game, and there's no more of it. That's my only true disappointment with HROT. I don't know if the developer didn't believe enough in the strength of their game's combat, or if they were scared to include arena fights for fear of upsetting a stubborn, hardcore type of gamer that wouldn't like it, or what. But these moments of high-pressure combat are high points, and it's a damn shame there aren't more of them. There's a few genuine scares that got me to scream, and while I'm not sure what's going on in this world, the setting is definitely interesting, and I'm sure there's some good lore to read into, especially if you know the history of the area. In the end, HROT is just a really solid shooter. I don't have that much to say about it, it's not that deep of an experience, it's just good. Fun, challenging, engaging, spooky, funny, an all-around great time. Pick it up if you haven't already. I'm Under the Mayo, like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the upcoming video on Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun. And to close out this video, enjoy my in-game performance of the Frail from 9 Inch Nails.